So who walks through that door on a Sunday morning that makes you feel uncomfortable? Not scared, not threatened, just uncomfortable. Maybe it's the way they're dressed. Maybe it's the way they smell. Maybe it's all the tattoos, or maybe it's the lack of tattoos. Maybe it's you see someone that has a life that's clearly a mess and you just don't want to be around it. Or maybe it's that person who walks through the door and you just know they've got it all together and you resent it before they ever say a word. Or maybe, and this one's probably even harder, who do you not even notice? Who is it that sits 2 rows over from you every single week and you have no idea what their name is? Who is it that you'll be at lunch this afternoon and they'll pass you as you're walking to your table and you won't even realize they were at church with you this morning? You never registered who they were. We've all done it. Most of us have one. You've probably thought of somebody in your head right now. We all do it. But for most of my teenage years, when I was like 12 years old, 13, up through probably 15 or 16, I wasn't the kid who really made anybody uncomfortable. I was the kid who wasn't even on the radar. I was the kid who sat in the back of the room and nobody noticed I was there. Not because anything was wrong, just because nobody was paying attention, and I kind of liked it that way. I didn't like the spotlight. I didn't really want to be singled out for anything. But the reality is you wouldn't remember my name. That's going to be important. We'll get back to that in just a minute. Because James 2 is going to take us into this question today that addresses situations like that. A question that on the surface it feels really simple. But as we start to dig, it feels like a Mack truck that is coming through and running us over. And James has already done that for 3 straight weeks, right? Only 9 more to go. Here's the question that kind of underlies everything we're going to talk about today. Who belongs in your church? The answer that James gives, it's not the answer most of us are living. So let's see what he has to say. We're going to start in chapter 2 today in verse 1. And James says this. He says, your iPad, there it goes. I thought he was going to tell me my iPad wasn't working today. He says this, my dear brothers and sisters, how can you claim to have faith in our glorious Lord Jesus Christ if you favor some people over others? That whole text right there, it's pretty much the sermon. Before we even get into it, that's pretty much where James is going to lead us. But before we get into the part about favoritism, we need to sit on the name that James is giving to Jesus in this. He calls him the Lord of glory, or the glorious Lord Jesus Christ. And you know what? James never calls him that anywhere else. As a matter of fact, nobody in the New Testament does. The referral here is the Shekinah glory that we read about in the Old Testament. It's this visible radiance of God's presence. That presence that filled the tabernacle, that filled the temple, that presence that Moses couldn't even look upon. That Isaiah would say, woe is me, I am undone. That John, when he was exiled to the island of Patmos, would see the glory of Jesus and he fell down like a dead man. And James, his half-brother, looks at his brother and says, that glory is him. That is Christology right there, and it's important. It's the whole argument, because if all true glory belongs to Jesus, every time we redistribute that glory to a man because of what they wear or what status that they have or what they can offer, it's a theological catastrophe. It's not just rude. It's not just unkind, it's a statement about where you think glory actually lives. James says, what is that? I got to figure out where this song's coming from. I think it's in the back. Okay. That kind of creeped me out a little bit. Okay. Anyways. James, as he addresses this, he uses some words here that in the NLT it translates as favor some people over others. In your translation, maybe it says don't show favoritism or partiality. But in the New Living Translation, it gives 4 words that in the Greek, it's one. And the one word that I've been trying to learn to say for a few days here, a week, is prosopolempsia. I think I actually got it out that time. I did not get that out in the first service. That word, James just made it up. Scholars say it's nowhere else in any other Greek text. It doesn't appear anywhere else in Greek literature, nowhere. The Roman world, it ran on favoritism. It ran on honor the powerful, dismiss the poor, move towards the shine and away from the shabby. It wasn't a vice. That's just life. That was every day for them in that world. Nobody had a word for stop showing favoritism, because nobody thought you should stop showing favoritism. And then the gospel shows up. And James has to invent a word because the world that they came from didn't even recognize this was a problem. You see, when he lays this out, he's not giving us a nicer version of the world's system. He has to come up with a whole new vocabulary to communicate how a Christian should walk. Who you are determines what you do. A Christian who has truly seen the Lord of glory can't keep ranking the people that Jesus died for. Not because they're trying harder, but because that vision of the Lord of glory has changed everything. The glory isn't in the status, it's in the image of the God who created that person. It's stamped on them, and that's where the glory is found, in the image of a one true holy God, and that's the person most of us so often walk past. Most of us are still running the old calculations, sorting the room based on appearance, or sorting the room based on income, or how useful is this person to me, or am I comfortable around this person? But James says we have new eyes. You have a new you in you through Jesus Christ. And those new eyes, we need to use them as followers of Jesus. Because the truth is, when you didn't deserve it, Jesus made room for you. So make room for them. All of them. Whether they make you feel comfortable or not. Whether they have anything to offer you or not. In verse 2, James says, for example, suppose someone comes into your meeting dressed in fancy clothes and expensive jewelry, and another comes in who is poor and dressed in dirty clothes. If you give special attention and a good seat to the rich person, but you say to the poor one, you can stand over there, or else sit on the floor. Well, doesn't this discrimination show that your judgments are guided by evil motives? James, he's not describing some policy that's been set out there by the church. He's not describing something that's in the church handbook or that anybody voted on. He's describing a normal human reflex of how we respond to people. Someone shabby walks in and the room moves away. Someone shiny walks in, the room gravitates towards them. It's an instinctive reaction, kind of like the way a plant will shift and start growing towards the light. Every year, or almost every year, we do an event called Sacred Assembly, where we gather together for for usually 4 nights. And on those 4 nights, we look at what God has done, and we dig into the Word, and we worship together, and we pray together. And most of those nights, we have a pretty decent crowd in the room. Never packed out by any means, but a pretty decent crowd that shows up. But last year, we had 5 University of Tennessee football players come to share what God's doing in their lives. There wasn't a single empty seat in the house. We had to pull the seats from the back to make sure everybody had one, and if I remember correctly, there were still people who had to stand in the back of the room. That night, I kind of stood up here, and 2 things kind of enter your mind. Grateful. Those guys were bold. They shared what God was doing in their life, and I was thankful for the stories they were sharing. It was real. And it impacted a lot of you all who were here that night. It's a year and a half ago, and I still occasionally hear some of you all bring it up. But it also makes a question pop up. A question that's hard to shake. Why were there empty seats on the worship night? It's not about pointing fingers, but it's a question that kind of sticks with me. Because it tells us, I think it tells all of us, that we are inclined to move towards the shine. Even in the church. Even at sacred assembly. We will fill the seats for the people the world already told us they were worth showing up for. But we leave empty seats on the nights when the only draw is Jesus. Why do we move towards the shine? Not in a villain kind of way, not consciously calculating, I can get something from them, but honestly, why does the room shift when someone impressive walks in? And if we're honest with ourselves, it's because deep down we want something from them. Maybe it's a need for status. So you align yourself with the person who has status. Maybe it's a need for security, so you align yourself with that person that makes you feel secure. Maybe it's a need for validation, so you chase words of approval from someone who you think it means something from. The way that you sort a room tells you what you think your life needs that Jesus hasn't provided. We look to other areas to get those needs filled. We look to other people. We gravitate to the shine. But James says in verse 5, he says, "Listen to me, dear brothers and sisters. Hasn't God chosen the poor in this world to be rich in faith? Aren't they the ones who will inherit the kingdom he promised to those who love him?" You see, God moves towards the ones we move away from. He moved towards you. Verse 6 and 7, he actually talks about how the rich oppressors, they're the ones who are blaspheming Christ's name. And he says the church has been giving the good seat to the people who are actually working against the gospel. And gives the floor to the people who God has chosen to be rich in the faith. James doesn't soften it. He hasn't softened anything as we've walked through this book. He says, you have dishonored the poor man. He doesn't say you've just missed him, you've just overlooked him. He said, you dishonored that man. So when is the last time you crossed the room towards someone who had absolutely nothing to offer you? Not just to be kind. Not just to check that box because pastor said you got to do it. But because you knew that the Lord of glory, his image was stamped on that person. And you knew it. that person in front of you wearing dirty clothes carried the image of the one true God. The direction we move in a room, it's a statement of our faith. But most of us, we're making a statement about it and we don't even know we're making the statement. My favorite pastor currently that I listen to, and I listen to him quite often. If you're a part of our men's ministry, you know well, because I talk about it. We just did the book by him. This guy by the name of Joby Martin. Joby's the pastor of the church of 1122 in Jacksonville, Florida. And he tells this story. I've heard him tell it a few times. In his sermons. He tells it quite often about early in his ministry. Now, early on in his ministry, he's working part-time for a church, and at the same time, because he's part-time at a church, he's working part-time at a gym. So Joby does what pastors do when they're working part-time somewhere, and he starts a Bible study at the gym, and people start showing up to it. One of the people who started coming was a woman, and her profession was that of an exotic dancer. So what's Joby do? He says, why don't you come to church with me Sunday? He didn't just invite her to come, he invited her to come with him. And she came. Not dressed like anybody else in the room. Didn't look like anybody else in the room. When she walked in, they let her know it. They didn't say anything to her. They didn't do this with words. It's all those small ways, those glances, that a room tells someone that they really don't belong. Joby says she left feeling more judged, more ashamed, more condemned than she'd ever felt anywhere else. Not at the club, not on the street, in a church, in the house of the Lord of glory. A few years later, Joby would plant the church of 1122, and he says, what happened that Sunday morning drives the whole mission of the church he planted. He says, one woman, one Sunday, a room full of believers, and they forgot who gave them their seat. The church handed her judgment instead of mercy, and you know what? She never walked through the door again. Verse 8, yes, indeed, it is good when you obey the royal law as found in the Scriptures. Love your neighbor as yourself. James calls it the royal law. It's the law given by a king. Our king is a person named Jesus, God in the flesh. And Jesus says that this, to love your neighbor as yourself and to love God, in that all the commands, all the law are summarized in that it's the heart of everything. To love God and to love people. And what the king said matters the most. So was the room that woman walked into, were they living this out? Do us, when we pack seats out for football players, but we have empty ones on worship night, is that the royal law in action? If we're honest, when we do that, we're not partially disobedient. James says we are breaking the whole heart of the law. Follow along what he says in verse 9. But if you favor some people over others, you are committing a sin. You are guilty of breaking the law. For the person who keeps all of the laws except one is as guilty as a person who has broken all of God's laws. For the same God who said you must not commit adultery also said you must not murder. So if you murder someone but don't commit adultery, you have still broken the law. He's not saying that every sin has equal consequences. I think we could all agree that murder carries a pretty heavy consequence in our society, as it should. He's saying something more fundamental for us. He's saying when you look at what God has commanded us to do, when we see the law that He's laid out before us, and we're not talking about the ceremonial laws, we're talking about the laws of how we should live our life as a Christian. We look at that, and the law isn't a buffet where you can pick and choose what you like. The law comes from a person, one lawgiver, and He's behind every command. And selective obedience isn't partial faithfulness. What happens when we choose which laws we're going to live under? You're telling Him that your judgment about which commands matter have more authority than He does. That's not faithfulness. That's putting yourself in His position. The truth is, you can't be pro-life and pro-marriage and walk past the person who's broken and just ignore that they're there. It's one God, the same voice, and He's saying you can't pick and choose. You follow me or you don't. They didn't just fail to be friendly, they broke the royal law. They silenced the voice of the king in the very house that was built to honor Him. He made room for you. Make room for them. That's the diagnosis, and it's pretty bad. But a good doctor, he doesn't just name the disease. He comes back in and he gives a cure. So he tells us something that really changes the way we should look at all of this. He says in verse 12, so whatever you say or whatever you do, remember that you will be judged by the law that sets you free. There will be no mercy for those who have not shown mercy to others, but if you have been merciful, God will be merciful when He judges you. He's saying mercy triumphs over judgment. God will be merciful if you show mercy. Here's what James is saying. If we get this wrong, we kind of miss the whole point of all this. He's not saying that if you show enough mercy, you will earn God's favor. He's not saying that you have to do this in order to earn that from God. That contradicts everything in the Bible. Everything that we know about grace from the whole of the Bible, that would contradict it. Nobody stands before God and says, I'm here because I was merciful enough. That's not the gospel. But what it is that when we extend mercy, that is the evidence that God's mercy has actually reached you. You see, we don't follow that law in order to earn God's favor. We follow it because we have God's favor. That because He's changed us, that He's made us new, and it changes everything for us. They're two very different things. One says mercy earns something, and the other says that mercy reveals something about you. If the gospel has actually landed and taken root, it has to show up. Mercy received should become mercy extended always. God showed us mercy. We should show that to the world. It's not a suggestion. But it is diagnostic because the unmerciful person has one of two problems. They've either never received mercy or they forgot they received mercy. But they both have the same cure. You look back at the beginning in verse 1 of this, James he brings us back to Jesus. Not to a principle, not to some sort of moral framework. He brings us to Jesus because He's the only hope, the Lord of glory. And here's what the Lord of glory did. He looked at you when you weren't shining, you were shabby. He looked at a humanity who had nothing to offer Him. He looked at a humanity that deserved a place on the floor, not a seat at the table. Not to be a part of the family. But he took a cross so that we could have that chair at the table. He absorbed judgment so that we could have mercy. He wore the shabby clothes, that crown of thorns, that borrowed tomb, the shame on the cross, so that we could be clothed in his righteousness, so that we could be seated at the Father's table. Mercy triumphed over judgment. First in his body, on our behalf, on a hill outside Jerusalem. The cross, it takes every ladder that we use to climb and it flattens it out. The glory has been relocated. And the only question left is the mercy that found you still moving through you. Or did it stop? James, when he says this, he's really quoting Jesus in Matthew 22, the royal law. It's the two greatest commands. Jesus says it's all summed up. Love God, love people. Northview Church, does that sound familiar to you? It should, because that's our mission statement. Love God, love people, make disciples. Disciple making doesn't happen if you don't love God and love people first. We say it all the time. You can't make disciples if you don't make room for the people. James 2, it's really our mission. It's the same thing. He made room for you. So we make room for them. We have to. And that phrase, as we said it a few minutes ago, it's kind of a map, but now we see there's a cost to it. And the cost was a cross. He made room for you when you had nothing to offer him. Make room for them when they have nothing to offer you. He made room for you when the only thing you brought was your sin. So let's make room for them, for other people, when all they're bringing is their mess. He made room at the cost of his own life, so let's make room for others at the cost of our own comfort. He made room for you, make room for them. That idea, mercy triumphs over judgment, it's not a sentiment. It's a command. It's the way we are to live our lives as followers of Jesus Christ. In reality, it's the outflow of a heart that has actually been reached by the gospel. And I know what it looks like, because somebody did it for me. When I was a teenager, as I said a few minutes ago, I was the invisible kid. The back of every room. Not even on the radar in school, in social situations, and in church. I was there, but I was invisible, just how I wanted it. But somewhere during that time, I began to feel this draw towards ministry, and it scared me to death. The last thing I wanted to do was preach. The last thing I wanted to do was stand up and open God's Word in front of other people. And if you knew me then, you would probably say that's a good idea. This is not where you need to be going. But fast forward a few years. I'm in my early 20s, 22, 23 years old, and I've begun to come out of my shell, but I'm still very much a behind-the-scenes kind of guy. I loved serving in the church as long as I didn't have to get on a stage. Keep me in the back. Let me help. And then my pastor at the time, named Scott Thomas, and some of you know Scott, he looked at me and he saw something that I really didn't see in myself, and he pressed on me. He pushed me. He got me out of my comfort zone, and he said, "Hey, you're preaching this week. Before I was ever ready to stand up and do anything like that, He pushed me to do it. Because for some reason, He believed I could pull it off even when I didn't believe it myself. He made room for me at a table, and I wasn't even sure I wanted a seat at that table. I was not the obvious choice. I wasn't even asking for an opportunity. But He looked past what I was saying about myself, and He saw what God saw, a calling. That was almost 26 years ago or so. Since that time, I've been in ministry pretty much the whole time. As a volunteer, 10 years as a youth pastor, 7 years pastoring and planting this church, standing up here with you all every Sunday. And all of it is because He noticed something in me. Because He saw what God was calling me to and pushed me to go follow the calling. Scott, he doesn't preach much anymore. Occasionally. And we're not in real close contact. I'm friends with him on Facebook, but we don't talk a lot. And if I'm honest, Scott probably has no idea how he pushed me. He has no idea the full weight of what he did. Because he probably did that for dozens of other guys. Quietly. No fanfare, no scorekeeping. He was just a pastor who looked at someone hiding in the background and decided to say, hey, you got a seat at this table. Go do what God's called you to do. That's how mercy works. That's what we're called to as believers. It doesn't stop. It doesn't stay where it lands in us. It keeps moving through us. And that's what Scott did. He made room for me. That's my goal, is to make room for you. To push you. To help you take that next step. Some of you, you're going to do that for somebody else. And 20 years from now, somebody's going to be standing up somewhere telling some version of this story that God did in them, and it will trace back to a Sunday morning at Northview Church when you pushed them out of their comfort zone. Because you showed them mercy. And you walked up to the person nobody thought needed a seat at that table. That's the mission. Love God, love people, make disciples. That's how it works. And Scott, he has no idea. But that's how mercy works. It keeps moving. The person who walks through that door next Sunday that makes something in you just kind of tighten up. Or the person you don't even notice. What if somebody crossed the room for them? What if somebody learned their name? What if we said you're welcome at the table? God's got something for you. What if we let the mercy He showed us go through us? And what if that person becomes the next small group leader? What if that person becomes one of our deacons? What if that person plants a church one day? Or becomes a pastor? What if the mercy that we show on just an ordinary Sunday, just because that's who we are, what if it sets something in motion that we will never see this side of eternity? Something that you'll never know. Something that Scott doesn't know. The mercy you've been given is not meant to stop with you. It's meant to carry through you. to that next person who God is calling into a relationship with Himself, who God is calling to something greater than they could ever imagine. It's meant to carry to the next person, and then the next person, and then the next person. As we love God, and we love people, and we make disciples. Because He made room for us. So we make room for them. That's the mission. That's the whole Christian life. So how do we respond to it? I want to first say something to a group in this room. Because it's Mother's Day. It needs to be acknowledged. Because for a lot of you in this room, Mother's Day is a beautiful thing. But for some, it's not. Some of you have longed to be a mother and it's never happened. Some have lost a child. Maybe through a miscarriage, maybe in another way. Some of you, you're here this morning and the relationship you have with your mom is broken. It's painful. Or maybe it's your first Mother's Day without mom. Some of you, you are a mother and your child has walked away from the faith or walked away from you. You need to know this. You belong here. Not in spite of what you're carrying, but because God is using it in you. He made room for you. Many of you, maybe you've never surrendered your life to Jesus. You've been coming to church, you know all the language, but you've never crossed the line into a relationship with Christ. You've never taken the seat, never accepted the mercy. Maybe it's because you don't think you're worthy. Jesus is Lord whether you acknowledge it or not. He made room for you and you have nothing to offer. And that's just how it's supposed to be. He took the cross so that He could give you a chair at the table. Some of you, you know Jesus. But mercy stopped running through you a long time ago. Is there a face that came to mind this morning as we went through this text? Maybe it's that face that you don't even know their name. Or maybe it's that name that you avoid. Someone you've been sorting out, moving away from instead of moving toward. But the Lord of glory died for them. Mercy that stops with you, it was never really yours to keep. It was always meant to move through you towards others. For whatever reason, God chose us to be the avenue that the gospel goes out into the world. He chose to use you to love Him, love people, and make disciples. I'm going to ask the band to come back up. And as they come, I want you to spend some time with the Lord. So go ahead where you're at. Maybe you're here this morning and you just have this weight of grief because of what this day is. I want you to know there is a seat at the table for you. Maybe you're here this morning and you've never surrendered to the Lord. I want you to know you are welcome in the Lord's family. Maybe you're here this morning and you know that grace, that mercy has stopped moving through you. I want you to repent of that and have the Lord put you back in motion and on mission. So spend a couple of moments However the Lord's leading you today to respond to Him. Maybe you need to come to the altar. Or maybe you need to come up here and talk with me or grab somebody else. Maybe you just need somebody to pray with. Maybe you need to get on your knees at your seat and just pray to the Lord however He leads this morning. Spend a couple of moments. How's He leading you today?